a look at. And there we are recording. So a couple of ground rules, like I said, this webinar is being recorded. We're going to have this available on the website for you to look at in the future and reference. We are also encouraging you to put your questions in the chat. You can also include them. There's a Q&A box somewhere at the bottom. There should be a Q&A button. You can drop them there too, and I'll be keeping an eye on that. And we'll likely save them for the end. We'll have a portion for discussion and Q&A, but if there's anything that's pressing, we can bring it up as well. So I'm excited to have Steve Robbie here today. He is with OpinionWorks, which is an environmental survey research firm. And they were who we worked with on this public perception survey that we were working on over the course of all of last year, which just got released over the summer. The public perception survey was a project aimed at better understanding the environmental behaviors and attitudes and knowledge of the people living around Long Island Sound. The last one was done in 2006, so this was way overdue, and hopefully the next one won't take another 20 years. But we're excited to present to you the information and, importantly, how we can put this to use. The last one was constantly being referenced in grant programs and used to shape the projects that a lot of people worked in the watershed. So hopefully that's our hope for this one as well. And what we want is to make the data as digestible as we can and useful for all of you. So before I hand it over to Steve, I'm going to, we have a couple of questions for you all. So I'm going to hit this and I'm going to share my screen. One moment. Share screen options. Oh no, what's going on? Excuse me, I'm sorry, one moment. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna use Mentimeter. If you have your phone nearby, you can scan the code there, or you can go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen. The first question that I like starting with is, what is your favorite kind of ice cream? If you don't like ice cream, you can just tell me your favorite dessert. That's okay. We've got mint, we've got pistachio, fish food, raspberry truffle, mint chocolate chip, moose tracks, chocolate, coffee. I'm with you on chocolate and coffee, definitely. Mocha chip, good stuff, good stuff. Cookie dough, mint chocolate chip. You know, I've heard that one's kind of controversial, but look at it winning. I'm with you. I like it. All right, we see chocolate, coffee, cookie dough, mint chocolate chip going strong. I don't like ice cream. Wow. Okay, all right. Power to you. All right, we're going to keep it going now. So now we're going to get more serious. Now the question is, which of these comes closest to your main job responsibilities? We have research, we have engineering, advocacy, education, executive leadership, or environmental management, or other. And if it's other, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, we've got a lot of environmental managers here, it looks like. We've got research, education. Okay. Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, I realized the chat was disabled. You should be able to use the chat now if you'd like. If I see a couple of others, if y'all would like to. There you go. I see communications manager. All right. So environmental management, a lot of that's to be expected. Grant program management, executive leadership, education. Excellent. Okay. And now we'll keep it rolling. The final question we have for you is, How would you describe your level of experience with engaging the public around environmental issues? Are you a newbie? Have you been less than a year or 2 years, 3 to 5 years? What do we have here? Okay, we have a lot of very experienced educators. That's great. Yeah, looks like a lot of in the more than 5 year, 3 to 5 year range seems to be the most common. That's awesome. All right, amazing. And I see it slowing down, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing now, but thank you so much for that. So I think without further ado, I'm gonna pass it over to you, Steve. Steve is gonna walk us over the meat and potatoes of the, uh, the public perception survey, some of the findings, and how to think through some of that data. And like I said, at the end, we'll have a Q&A portion, but if any questions come to mind, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A box below at any point, and we'll get to them at the end. All right, so Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Jimena. Thank you very much. And good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. I will share with you this incredible resource that we have in the form of this study. And our goal today is to make this applied. We want to make this something that you can access and use, and the study will be valuable if that's possible. So I'm going to spend a little time on methods and a little time on findings, and then we're going to engage in some look at how you can access the study and work with it directly and take your questions. As I go along, I hope that you will populate the chat with any questions or comments. There's also the Q&A that Jimena mentioned that you're able to use. Let me briefly introduce myself and my firm. We're called OpinionWorks. We've been in existence since 2001. I founded this firm because I wanted to work in the environmental space. And we also do a fair amount of public health work, which is a close relative maybe to the work that we all do. And we work a little bit in higher ed as well, helping in the educational area. So our work is research-based. We are social science-based as an organization, and we think about how people make decisions, how people perceive things. And so here in the Long Island Sound watershed, we're thinking about perceptions of the sound and people's willingness and desire to engage. And so that's really what we're going to talk about here today. Our objective that we were given as we began this work is on the screen. I mean, we wanted to conduct this survey and follow-up focus groups among residents of the watershed. Now, I know that there may be some people here I saw on the registration list from further upstream in northern New England. So we did not cover anything north of Connecticut, but we did cover the whole state of Connecticut and the portions of New York State that are in the watershed. So this is a Connecticut, New York survey. However, I think some of the upland Connecticut findings may be applicable even further upland. So we can talk about that with you if that's of interest. But we wanted, first and foremost, to update the 2006 survey. 2006 is a long time ago. This was way overdue to accomplish. So there were many questions lurking in terms of what we wanted to know today in 2024, which is when the survey was conducted. And then there are emerging issues that didn't exist maybe in 2006. So there are things we wanted to understand around some of these things you see on the screen: resilience in the face of changing climate, plastics and how we should deal with plastic debris, and some other things like that, barriers to behavioral change. And then finally, third, we wanted to help update the public engagement and knowledge target in the CCMP. And so the results of this work directly help with that objective. So as this began, a committee was constructed, and I want to give thanks to Nancy Balcom at Connecticut Sea Grant for heading up this effort and putting that great working group together, who hung with this project and provided a lot of very good hands-on guidance to this work throughout. Some of you were on this webinar today. So, we started off with these sorts of formative questions. What are people's impressions of the sound? I mean, these are very basic questions, aren't they? Do people feel connected to the sound? Are they physically connected? Are they psychically or emotionally connected to the sound? And what's keeping them from connecting? And what can we do to better connect people to the sound? And then barriers and motivators for actions that would be beneficial, things that we can all do in our daily life that would help. And so we spent a fair amount of effort here looking at those sorts of things. And the hypothesis that if we bring people in touch with the sound, will that inspire them to do more things? Is that a provable hypothesis? And we have some information here about that. And then, as mentioned, to update those ecosystem targets in the CCMP. And importantly, this last bullet point, it was very important to the work group that this research be truly representative of all, including underserved audiences, people that may not always participate in research. And so we went to great effort to make sure that we were as representative as we could be. So there were two phases of the research to talk about. One was the survey. It's an enormous sample size by design, 3,709 interviews. So those of you that are quantitative and have worked with survey research know that that's a great big data set that gives us a lot of power, in terms of being able to segment things, look within at many different subgroups. And we'll talk about a few today just to give you a taste of that. But that's where we hope that all of you who are interested in the data would find the ability to dig in and find what you need here in the data set. There were as many as 91 questions. That's a lot, obviously. Depending on who you were and how you answered, you might have triggered other questions in the questionnaire. So it's comprehensive. We covered a lot of topics. And then we used a multi-mode approach, which most researchers use today because people don't answer their phones. Some people are still digitally disconnected. There's a variety of reasons why it's important to reach out to people through different modes so that we can be inclusive in the survey design. And finally, we had a Spanish version of this, and 10% of the interviews ultimately were conducted in Spanish across the region. Following that, there were 4 focus groups. And so we segmented the groups as follows, as you see on the screen. I mean, there were people in one group whose connection to the sound was not so strong. Maybe they don't visit, maybe they don't feel connected or realize that they even live in proximity to the sound. There's a second group of people that were very strongly connected to the sound, in it, on it, thinking about it, care about it. And then there was a C group of people that want to be connected to the sound, but there are barriers in the way of that, whatever those may be. And so that was an interesting group to hear from. And then finally, D, Spanish language, Spanish dominant residents who spend some time outside, and so we wanted to hear what their thoughts were. This was a 2-hour discussion. Shirley Marte, my colleague, is pictured there, and she was the moderator. She's a great moderator of these groups. And so we investigated some of these issues that you see below on the screen to really better understand some of the survey results that we were seeing. So I won't go into detail on all these people. I think the point that we want to make on this slide is that we did receive or achieve really very good representation in these focus groups across the whole lower watershed here, Connecticut and New York. And so everybody had their own story and everybody had their relationship to the sound or not. And so that fed in to some of the conclusions that we're about to talk about here. And I just want to say, for those of you that are not used to focus groups or doubt that a few people can really inform something when you've got that great big quantitative survey, I mean, let me tell you, we got a lot of very helpful color commentary, and really the focus in these focus groups was to understand the why questions and to really ask people to share their thinking with us and to watch how people react to each other when certain ideas are shared. So in the main, we'll focus on the survey today, and I'll bring in a few thoughts from the focus group. But I want to share with you 5 big themes that came out of this research, and then we'll go to some of the applied data. So theme number 1, this may not sound like a big finding, but I think it was surprising to the working group to an extent how positive the perceptions are of the sound out there in the population. So one of the exercises that we engaged in on the survey was to ask people for 3 words. What are 3 adjectives that first come to mind when you think about Long Island Sound? We just had our ice cream exercise, so we all know how word clouds work. Um, and so beautiful, peaceful, relaxing, fun, so there's refreshing. I mean, you see some wonderful words that are a little bit more psychic, and then you see some activity words like swimming and fishing and beach, serene, cool. And then there's some negative stuff that pops in there, polluted. What I want to tell all of you, and you know this, I think, from your work, but if people had negative things to say, we would hear it here. I mean, there would be negative stuff. The top of mind ideas that came through were positive. We have very little negatives here. The sound, it just as a basic proposition, is viewed positively by people. Now, here's one of the great benefits of being near the water, and we all know this. You know it. We know it personally. We also know it from our work that there's an emotional benefit to being near water. So, is it true being near Long Island Sound makes me feel peaceful and happier? 60% agree and 33% strongly. So, for those who've got experience being near the sound, there's a positive emotional response. Very little disagreement with that question. This translates into a sense of caring about the sound. I care about Long Island Sound. 67% agree. Now, note, it's higher among older residents, it's higher among more affluent residents, it's higher in coastal counties that are further east in the watershed. That has a lot to do with how actively people are in contact with the sound. And so, as we're about to see, there are some barriers to being in contact with the sound if you are less affluent, if you live further west or whatever. And so those are important for us all to know about and to think about. But as a basic, broad concept, caring about the sound is widespread. If you go from the sound to the river, stream, or coastline that's nearest to where you live, the number climbs even higher. So there's a lot of love for the water and the water near me. Um, but you know, the environmental educators who are present, this probably won't surprise you, but do you live in the Long Island Sound watershed? Correct answer, yes, 100%. Survey answer, 32% yes. And over half of them aren't quite sure. You've only got 14% of these respondents who know for sure that they're in the Long Island Sound watershed, and a whole lot of people who insist that they're not. You can see the geography of that over to the right, that it does vary based on where you live in terms of upland or closer to the water. People in the city of New York are less likely to realize maybe that they're in the watershed. Now, you also can challenge me on the fact that the word watershed is not broadly understood by the public. And so that's something that we struggle with in this work. And we know that by asking people, we didn't do it here, but sometimes in focus groups, we ask people, what do you think a watershed is? And a lot of folks just go to a literal understanding of a structure that might be close to the water, maybe where you keep boats, and so do I live in a watershed? No, I don't. I don't live in one of those. I live in a house or an apartment. So there is that. But nonetheless, if you explain to people the water drains, and we've done this many times in different geographies, people still don't necessarily realize. So there is a gap in something that we need to work on educationally. I do want to observe, though, this quote from Bryna, who was in one of our focus groups, the Connected group, and she was remarking on the fact that around this Zoom room that she was in, there were people from all corners of the Sound, from the Bronx all the way out to the tip of Long Island and up the Connecticut River. And she reflected here, and the sound as a unifier. I think there's a lot of common ground that we can find when talking about things we love, like the sound. Now, these were the connected people, but I think this unifying impact of the sound, this potential that it has to be a regional identifier in a region, by the way, that is, of course, heavily urbanized and has many other things as claims to fame. Nonetheless, the sound has a special role and ability. Um, Parenthetically, not yet maybe fully exercising that ability. There's more that can be done to define the sound in people's minds. Theme number 2, there is modest improvement that we can see in perceptions of the sound's water quality, and it's specifically geographic, as we're about to see. So, overall, do you think the quality of the water in Long Island Sound is excellent, good, fair, poor? And so you can see there's about as many people that give a positive. Um, there's a, I'm looking at the chat. Sorry, Shirley has left. Yeah, Shirley was one of the moderators. She was the moderator of the focus groups. Um, 45% excellent plus good, 41% fair plus poor. So as many people saying positive things as saying negative things about the water, it's very split. But I do want to point out that the excellent plus good or the positive rating rises as you move from the western part of the sound over to the eastern part of the sound. So perceptions change as you move from, let's say, Westchester County or the Bronx, through New York, or the same phenomenon occurs in Connecticut, where the further east you are, the more positive view you have about water quality. But there's an interesting additional thing to note. The trend in water quality. Now, it's modest, 29% better versus 22% worse, and the rest of the people are either thinking it's about the same or they aren't sure about a trend. But for those people that feel a trend, there's a modest positive that people are feeling. I will tell you, this is not necessarily the case everywhere we work. In fact, when we began our work in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, where we've done most of our work 15 years ago or 20, it was 2-to-1 negative in terms of people's perceived trend lines. That, through a lot of effort on the part of a lot of people and organizations, has shifted quite a bit here in the Chesapeake Bay region. Long Island Sound region, you are starting off, or here today, in a relatively good position in terms of people seeing some improvement. And there is, on balance, a little bit of improvement, but it's noteworthy that where people are more likely to say that there's improvement is in the western end of the sound. So Rob, who was and is for a long time a charter boat captain who lives in the Bronx, said this emphatic thing about the change in water quality and peppered his comment with specifics about mussels reappearing and other things. And so his view was well informed because he's on the water a lot and he has a longitudinal perspective on the sound, having been on it for decades. It was not unusual. We heard a woman from Bridgeport talk about the way the beach is no longer littered the way it was when she was younger. So people are seeing improvements, and that's a credit to the Long Island Sound Partnership, to all of its partners, everybody here who's working on this. There is improvement seen. Another sign in the survey work that there may be some improvement being seen by the public, and this is one of the few areas where we can reliably compare the 2006 survey data with the 2024 survey data, that there's a measurable improvement in the number of people that are saying the water is unsafe for swimming. So today it's 26%. That's down from 38% in 2006. The same is true if we ask people about eating seafood that comes out of Long Island Sound. And there's been a dramatic decrease there as well, from 41% unsafe in 2006 to 25% unsafe today. So listen, we can talk about 1/4 of the population who has significant worry about eating things that come out of the Sound, and that's valid to talk about. But we should also focus on the fact that there's a positive trend line here, that things are really improving in perception. Theme 3, it's about access. So those of you that work on access to the water or care about that, which we all do, access to the water is vital. I say that not as an opinion. I'm saying that based on the research and what the public is telling us they feel. Having access to the water is important to them, but there's significant gaps in who has access. So we want to start with this basic concept. Can you even picture in your mind water that is close to where you live? Stream, river, bay, or coastline? If yes, what's its name? So 81% of the survey respondents could picture some water, they said. Of them, 46% could both picture and name it. So almost half. Another 28% could picture water near them, but they couldn't put a name on it. And then there were a few people that said it's too small to have a name. And then we've got some other folks over here who just can't picture water. They said, nope, I can't. There's no water near me, or I don't know. So 1 in 5 cannot picture water, which is a striking finding to some degree. It is an urbanized watershed in many parts, as we know, and the urban residents are much more likely to say they can't picture water, but so are people of color, whoever they are, African American, Hispanic, or Asian. They are more likely to say that they can't picture water. And people who have lower incomes are also less likely to be able to picture water. Now, why is any of that important? Because this metric of being able to just picture water and name it near where you live correlates to many other things in the survey. And I'm going to give you one example. The percentage who say, I care about Long Island Sound. You remember we looked at that survey result a few minutes ago. The number is 67% overall. But if you can picture water near where you live and you can name it, 81% of you say you care about the sound. If you can picture it, but you can't name it, 64% do. And if you can't picture water near where you live, only 42% of you care about Long Island Sound. This really impressive correlation exists on many other measures on the survey, including things like behavioral stuff or intention to behave a certain way. So if we're trying to engage the public, this is one strong argument for connecting people better with the water near them, if there is water near them. How about having convenient access to the sound or other waters near you? So 68% say that they do, leaving about 1/3 who either say, no, I do not, or I don't know. And that is higher. That 1/3 grows significantly among younger residents. It climbs among new residents of the region. It climbs among people that have lower incomes, and it climbs among both Black and Hispanic residents. These are people out there in our communities who are less likely to say they have convenient access to the water. Reasons why people are not visiting the sound. So this is an open-ended, or rather it was a closed-ended, but they could mark any that applied to them. So I just want to take a moment with this to point out the variety of reasons on the list and also a couple of the specifics. So too far, and I don't have enough time. Okay, that's number one and number two. And to an extent, there's not a lot we can do about either of those reasons, potentially. But cost of parking and permit fees. We heard a lot about this in the focus groups. I'm not sure we can tell all the towns along the coastline to erase their parking fees, but it's a real barrier for people, the fees that exist and how they can't access. So more free public access points. Lack of transportation is a big issue. We had a woman who lives in one of the boroughs in the city in a focus group who talked about taking an all-day trip just to go out to Long Island to the Sound on public transportation. It was a long journey. When she got there, it was worth every minute of it. It was very difficult, though, and arduous. And she described that, but loved it. So transportation is a barrier for so many people. And then there's some who prefer other bodies of water, like the ocean or whatever, and so we can go down this list. But I just want to point out that there are barriers on this list that we can address, that we can think about together, think about creatively, so that we can try to remove some of those barriers for people. Now, you may be interested in what people say they're doing outdoors. And so we've got these activities on the scale frequently, occasionally, seldom, or never. And I'm showing you the top 2 points on the scale: hiking or walking, bird watching, and looking at wildlife, etc. And so the first number here in the box is the total of these two segments of the bar. The second number is whether people said they did them near the sound or on the sound. So you can see the differential there, but there's quite a bit of good contact with the sound and its nearby waters that you can see here. One of the points that I want to make to you, a takeaway, is that many people in the watershed just want to be near the water. In fact, they don't want to be in the water or on the water. They want to be near it. They want to be in proximity to it. So this has implications as you think about building out access points and programming them. It's not all about boat rentals and boat launches and life vests and kayak rentals and instruction. There's also uh, places to sit, places to throw a picnic blanket, a trail, those sorts of more passive things, place to walk your dog. I mean, those are very important and they need to be a critical part of the mix as we think about how we program our access points. If you are in parks or on trails near the water, do you feel welcome and a sense of belonging there? The sense of belonging is an important issue. It's part of the thing that the partnership is thinking about in its targets. And here we find that 77% of the public always or usually feels welcome. 15% sometimes or never do. And then there's a handful that don't know or just don't go to these places, they say. So if we look at the folks who sometimes or never do, it's notably higher among people that are younger. And the younger you are, the less welcome you feel in these spaces, which is interesting. And among people with lower incomes. And so, do you hear a pattern here in terms of some of the groups that are feeling a little bit disconnected or left out or whatever the case may be? In terms of this lack of welcome, um, let, I didn't put a slide into that effect, but people were telling us that it was a combination of things. And some of the lack of welcome is stuff we can't do much about, like I'm afraid of the water. I don't want to be too close to it. So there's that. But there's also, we heard about microaggressions, people looking at me a certain way or making me feel uncomfortable. So there's a fair amount of that that exists in these spaces as well, and not in this project, but we have elsewhere, and can certainly share with you things that one might do to help people feel a better sense of welcome when they get into these spaces. And that's something that we really want to concentrate on and think about in the future. Theme number 4. Residents understand people are impacting the health of the sound, but they doubt their own impact in multiple ways. They doubt their own impact. So, first of all, I want to tell you that protecting the natural environment is a priority for individuals. If you ask them to rank it up against all the other challenges that are out there in the world today on your personal priority list, you've got 62% that place it above average or higher in terms of something that they want to make sure occurs. So that could translate into personal action. It could translate into their desires for public policy making or whatever. But there is a sense, a very strong one, that the public cares about this. Then what about this idea? The actions of people on land have an impact on the health of Long Island Sound. So Long Island Sound is a great big body of water. It connects to the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, who would think that humans can really impact all that? But 73% of the public is prone to agree with this basic idea that our actions on land can have an impact on the sound. So that's a big level of agreement. Um, but, in your view, if most local residents change their everyday behavior, how much would it improve the quality of water in Long Island Sound? Um, Over half say a great deal plus some, and about a third say not much, only a little, or not at all. So many people doubt that collective action can help. About half or a little more think it can help. One of the factors here is that when you get people talking in a focus group, one thing they're quick to point out is they don't see sufficient action by government, by large institutions, and certainly by industry. And by industry, I don't mean necessarily smokestacks, but big corporations that are producing lots of stuff and are citizens of these communities too. Focus group respondents, and this was no exception, are quick to want to see more action. And one of the things they typically say is if those big fish would step up, then I'd be much more prone to do things myself. But I can't really impact the problem the way some of these big actors can. And so we need to know that now. You all represent different organizations and some government agencies that are doing a lot of work. And so part of the message here is not that government is shirking or that big nonprofits are shirking or whatever. Part of the message is we may need to talk about this more with the public to encourage them because they don't always know what we're doing, do they? Now, how about this? I know what I can do to help. Only one third, 36% agree, feeling like they know what they could do. If they wanted to help, they would know how to do it. So there's a tremendous gap there. And then how about this? Do you think there's anything that you do now as part of your daily life that might hurt the quality of water in Long Island Sound? The yes is only 16%. So 1 in 6 people think that anything they're doing, and when you ask them what, those 16%, they tend to cite these things, litter, sometimes they create trash that ends up on the ground or whatever. Or I'm driving or polluting in other ways, or maybe I'm consuming too much stuff that could end up in the water. So those are the things that individuals think about. There's some fertilizing chemical type stuff they think about too. If we invert the question into a more positive framework, do you think there's any change that you could make in your daily life that might help improve the quality of water in Long Island Sound? The number grows by 10 points to 26. It's still very small. 3/4 of the public is not able to think about anything that they might do differently that could help. I mean, my goodness, if this isn't a clarion call, to all of us who are engaged with public outreach and trying to engage the people out there, and doing stuff. So, what they suggest that they could do, those 26%, not littering, not polluting, recycling more. There's some advocacy or policy stuff that does come through and some voluntarism that comes through in this question. And I just toss Paula's comment in here as a thought, and it's not the answer, but it's an interesting little psychological tape. Her point is she had this friend who was active and busy cleaning up the neighborhood, picking up stuff. And this friend got all of the other friends engaged, and they were all out there doing it. And it was fun, And so her point is you don't have to do it for environmental reasons. You can do it because your peer group thinks it's fun to pick things up to work together as a team, which was her case. So the answer is not always environmental. The answer is often social or something else. And so that's, you all know that. Theme 5. With a little nudge, residents are more likely to adopt beneficial behaviors. So let's look at that. And I'm trying to, at this section, I'm trying to tease you a little with what the survey can offer you because the amount of depth here is far too great for us to get into today, but I'm going to give you just one example. But we measured 14 behaviors on the survey. 9 of them, I think, were positive behaviors. And then there's these negative ones down below that we hope people don't do. They're measured on a frequency scale, or in some cases, a yes/no scale, depending on the behavior. But, 5-part scale from very frequently or always down to never. So we've got 4 examples here that have to do with litter and trash and such. Cleaning up after your dog's waste, if you have a dog, recycling, using a refillable bottle, and picking up litter when you see it, other people's litter. So you can see the frequency scale. So for all 14 of the behaviors, we have a frequency scale like this, where we're able to evaluate what people are doing and how frequently they're doing it. So kind of how bought in people are, how habituated some of these things are for individuals. Now, from a social science standpoint, we want to focus on the people that have not yet adopted the behavior. So the people that say, I seldom do that, I never do that, or they're not sure. I mean, these are people that we want to work with. And a colleague of mine calls this the opportunity group. I mean, you could think of that as your target market or the people that we want to impact. So with them, we asked a follow-up question, which was, how likely are you in the next year or so to do the thing, whatever the thing was? And that was measured on a 3-point scale, like you see, very likely, somewhat likely, not likely. And so we were able to quantify within that opportunity group how poised people are to begin the action. And so the best place to start, if you're sitting there thinking, boy, I'd like to engage the public on something that's going to help, let's take a look at the survey data. And in your geography, let's find the big opportunity group that's coupled with good likelihood, high likelihood. And so if you've got a behavior where there's a big group of people that aren't yet performing the behavior, and you see here that they're poised, like people are thinking about it, or it's kind of something they're feeling guilty about, or maybe there's some social pressure that's already in place, that's a behavior we want to work on. So the survey can guide you in that respect. It can help give you a lot of information about this. We ask people just an open-ended question if there's anything else that they are doing to help improve the health of the sound or its nearby waters. And so you can see what they say. I mean, these were coded into categories. And so you can see the top of the list. And the emphasis here is on visible trash. And that is always the entry point for people. There's other things. I mean, there's volunteering and some other stuff, carbon footprint, some of that's further down the list. So those are good things. And many people are driven to do those things. But the entry point for lots and lots of our neighbors is this visible trash area. It's the place to start. It's the place to open a conversation with people because it's often what they see. So let's sum up this presentation of findings. There's 5 things I've shared with you. So I want you to remember the perceptions of the sound are positive. That's a starting point. And 2, there's some improvement that we can see in perceptions of the water quality. And so that hinges on the great work that a lot of people here and elsewhere have been doing for the last years and continue to do. And 3, there's the issue about access. So it's very important to people. It's something that they want and see the benefits of. And yet there are some gaps and there's some things we need to think about in terms of access. And also, once people access the water, what do they want to do there? Number 4, that people understand there's a human water relationship in terms of impact, but there's reasons why they doubt their impact. Either they can't think of things they're doing that are harmful or things they could do that are beneficial, or they don't think those things, if they did them anyway, would add up to anything. So we have a job to do. And there's plenty of social science to help guide us in this job of how to bring the public along, to get people more on board with being engaged in their daily life with healthy behaviors. And then that's number 5, so little nudge, little incentive, little tool or help, not just information, but more. Then residents are ready to adopt some beneficial behaviors. Um, I want to provoke you to think about some different uses of the research, and I hope that some of you will use the chat if you're thinking about anything that you could do or wonder if you could do with the data. But it can be used, obviously, by anybody here who is engaged with public education. Anybody, number 2, who's engaged with behavior change or trying to get the public to come along and adopt some stuff that's helpful. Number 3, anybody that's programming or building or trying to locate water access sites or anything like that, there's good information for you here. Number 4, anybody who's involved with trying to foster a sense of belonging or connection or welcome, there's some good information for you here in this work. Number 5, if you're engaged in removing barriers for people so that they can better enjoy or more readily enjoy the sound, there's great information for you here. And then number 6, your funders will probably be grateful if you take a look at some evidence-based information as you submit your grant request. I'm not speaking for them. There's funders here, I believe, and they can speak. And Jimena may have some things to say about that if you want to pop in. I see you're unmuting.
Yeah, I think I'll just say like I think I mentioned in the beginning, right? The old public perception survey was often used and quoted in, for example, in Long Island Sound Futures Fund projects. And so I would encourage folks to, if you're thinking about applying to grant programs, when thinking about how to shape your project and maybe how to target it, or definitely lean into this information and tell us that you did that, because it's really helpful to know that when grantees or potential grantees are being strategic and are using science backed information to design their educational programs or their implementation programs. Definitely a good resource to tap into, definitely.
Excellent. So let's tell you all where to find it, how to access the research. So the Long Island Sound Partnership has put this research up on its website, and here's the URL, and maybe Jimena, we should put this in the chat. What do you think? And here's my information as well. You can feel free to reach out to me. I'm accessible and happy to talk with any of you about this. I would like to show you the actual website and what is there. So you'll end up on this landing page if you click that link. And so there's several things that you can access here. Um, One is the report itself. And so if you click here, it will bring you into, I did it earlier, so I have it open. It'll bring you into the report. This is about a 50-page document that narrates in more detail what I just went through with you. But it'll give you very helpful context. And there are some things here that I did not have time to go through. For example, some of the most important subgroup findings. And so you will find some good guidance. And I think if you take the time to read that document, you'll have the good overview, a very nice basis on what this research tells us, and will probably spark your thinking in terms of other places you should explore. Beyond that, down below, you actually have access here to the survey questionnaire and data tables. So we can click into these. So the questionnaire is here, and this is the full questionnaire that people were asked with all of the aggregate results for the entire watershed. It's not broken out, it's aggregates. Nonetheless, that will help you if you want to see the full sweep of what we subjected these poor residents to with 91 questions. But you can see that there. And then you also have, and I know this will be small on your screens, but you also have crosstabs, segmented results for many different subgroups. And this is exciting. If you're quantitative, you're probably quivering in your chair right now because there's so much here. So there's a little primer, a one paragraph primer on how to read this. I just want to, some of you are like, oh my gosh, is he going to go through all that? No, but what I do want you to just know is that there's a quick and easy way to deal with this, and I'll tell you what it is. And I'm available in case you dive into this and want to remember how to look at them. But every question is listed in sequence. This is a 400 and some page document, I think, but all the questions are here. There's 4 pages of data for every question. And so there's many different subgroups. And the first page or banner of data goes through all the geographic breaks at a county level. So we can look at all of Connecticut. We can look at the 4 upland counties or the 4 coastal counties, and then we can look at the counties individually. We can do the same thing in New York. And then these people that I spoke about earlier who can picture water and know its name versus people that can't name it versus it's too small versus everybody who can picture water, whether they can name it or not, and people who can't picture water. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of these on the 4 pages of data, goes through all the demographics that we measured, all the socioeconomic indicators that we measured, and other things. And so you look at this, and this is, do you go fishing or shell fishing? And if so, how often? So frequently, occasionally, rarely or never. And there's a couple of summary rows in here, top 2, and I do this near the sound. So the last thing I'll say about this is where you see the letters upper and lower case, that is a measure of statistical confidence that it's significantly different from the row or the columns that are referenced. So in other words, this 25% in coastal Connecticut for doing things near the sound, doing the fishing and shell fishing near the sound, is statistically greater than B, C, and G, which is all of Connecticut, upland Connecticut, or Litchfield for whatever reason. And so that's how you look at this. And so where you see a cluster of letters, that's where your eye should go. And that tells you what is statistically significant. So with that, Jimena, I hope we have a little time for a little conversation. And again, I want to stress, ask questions if you have them about how to read any of that or how to access the data.
Thank you so much, Steve. We do have a couple of questions, and folks, please definitely feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. The Q&A box is a little easier to keep track of. The first question we have here, Steve, is I think you spoke to this a little bit, but people are generally agreeable, e.g., caring about Long Island Sound. I'm wondering if surveys of other estuaries had a similar response distribution.
Well, we're experienced in the Ohio River Basin, the Delaware Basin, and the Chesapeake Bay. It varies. It varies a great deal. I'd say you're probably at least midstream in terms of the virtue of the central water body in the minds of the public and also willingness to get engaged. The Chesapeake Bay, by virtue of the fact that it's such a centerpiece culturally as well as otherwise for the region I live in, and because it's been discussed ad nauseum in a good way for 40 years with the public, there's higher levels of everything there. But the Ohio River Basin, where we recently worked, much lower levels. And the motivations are very different in a place like that. So every estuary or watershed has got its own set of issues and motivations and things. And we need to probably not compare ourselves to others too much and more think about what we need to do to move the conversation forward here. I mean, it strikes me that you are starting in the Long Island Sound watershed with a very positive kind of terrain in terms of public will and public interest, but a really disconnected public, a public that is really not thinking about this very much and doesn't have the first idea of what they could do to help. And so, to an extent, that's an opportunity. It's a blank slate. To an extent, it's a big barrier because we've got a lot of groundwork to do with everybody. We have to be more uh, we have to introduce people to the sound more and get them in touch with their local streams and rivers as well. And once there, we have to be very intentional about how they're communicated with. And so that that's a whole nother conversation for another day, but I think that there's plenty to say on that, and there's a lot you can do.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely a lot to do. So we have two questions that are kind of related. So curious about responses on access relative to people's distance from the sound. And same question about those who recreate near the sound and are farther away. Sounds like another transportation issue. Very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely there's distance from the sound, but the distance, let's not think of distance in miles or minutes. Well, let's think of it not in miles. Let me put it that way. And so if you live in the Bronx in a certain kind of a housing development or something, you feel very, very far from the waters of the Sound potentially, even though in terms of physical proximity, you're probably very close. So, we had colorful anecdotes from people that live more to the east in the focus groups talking about how they see the water every day. Some of them are in the water, driving over bridges, kind of a sense of closeness to the water. And so the geography is very, very important here in this whole conversation. And it isn't just physical distance, is the point I'm trying to make. And so sometimes there's psychic distance or there's transportation gaps. And those things need to be thought a lot more about.
Yeah. Okay, so this question, a question about personal impact on their local water body where they live might be interesting. In
Mhm.
fact, behavior conductive to the local water is the same as behavior that benefits Long Island Sound. Protecting the local water protects Long Island Sound. Can this be elucidated with your survey data? It would be interesting and support the healthy watersheds theme of the partnership.
Yeah, for sure. We do have a little bit of content here in this work that focuses on local waters as opposed to the sound proper. And so that can be leaned on. But in a broader sense, your point is correct. I mean, proximity is almost always stronger than a water body that's further away that you might care about, but you feel less ownership or connection to. So, yeah, of course, those of you especially that are away from the sound, the main stem of the sound. If you're upland somewhere, um, I'm sure you're working on your local water and making that message that you just mentioned that what you do in here on our local waters is benefiting the sound. If you choose to say that, that's true, and that will be the best way to engage people. No question about it.
Thank you, Steve. And another question. I don't know if we got to this one in this survey, but curious about how people who value quote unquote the perfect yard might feel about their impact on local waters and Long Island Sound. Landscaping is probably much more harmful to watershed health than littering than people seem to focus on. Do we? I don't remember if we
Well,
Do
we
we
have a
know yet?
fertilizing, we do have the fertilizing questions. We have a septic upgrade question as well, but that's not quite what the questioner is asking about. But yeah, I used to live across the street from this guy when we were in the city of Annapolis. We're now outside of town, but he had the perfect green lawn and he had a storm drain right at the bottom of his lawn. And it was just like, oh, and but there was nothing that was going to change him because he took such pride in that. We all know people like this, but those people are the exception. I mean, there are those hardcore lawn advocate type people who want to dump a lot of fertilizer, but there's a ton of people that are fertilizing more than they need to and are just as happy to stop for economic reasons or other reasons. And so fertilizing is a behavior that we can impact. So is reducing lawn size. There's a great interest right now in native plants that's burgeoning. People are wanting to know more about that. So conservation landscaping and that whole area is something also that can be worked on. And don't try to get the people that are hardcore. We want to get people that are on the bubble. And so think about that opportunity group and think about the likelihood scale. And we always want to be working on that next group out that isn't yet performing the behavior, but is prone or thinking about it or slightly willing. And we just need to give them whatever that little extra help is that they need, a little landscaping advice, a little incentive, a coupon, or whatever it is. You can make big change. And so forget about the guy who's got the super green lawn. We're not going to get him right now, but at some future date, we may.
All right. So I think we have time for one more quick question. And someone asked, were any questions asked about people's interests if they were given easier access to the sound?
So we can do some correlation here with the data set. We aren't able, at least in this work as we constructed it, to simulate what would actually happen. But we can look at people that do have access and people that don't have access, people that are doing things, people that aren't. And particularly that focus group C that I talked about, people that want to have that access but don't for whatever reason, and kind of how they're feeling and what would impact them and so on. And so there is a fair amount. But look, every good research project leads to more questions. I mean, there's always more. And so that's one that I think bears further exploration for sure.
Okay. And we did get a final request from Robert. Since someone was talking, you talked about the public's reluctance to take action until the government and until they see other bigger players making their moves. Could you discuss what the survey says about people's trusted sources of information?
Thank you, Robert. That was a great last question. So I didn't put this in the slide deck, and I should have. But yes, we asked about trust in different partners. Some of you are here. We didn't really name agencies, but we asked about categories of agencies. And one thing that is always surprising to public sector people, especially, is frankly how well trusted their agencies are by the public. And those of you that might be with a DEC or some other environmental agency, or if there's any EPA people here today, I don't know if there are with the shutdown, but those agencies are highly regarded by the public, trusted. And so you should know that. Nonprofits that are working on this also earned really good trust numbers in the survey. So put yourself in the forefront, talk about it, because the public wants to hear from you about these things.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. I think with that, I'll wrap up. The last thing I'll say is that when you registered, there was a question in there for you asking you if you wanted to be added to a listserv. We're working right now on producing more resources like this webinar, like the public perception survey, for practitioners that work at that intersection between people and the environment to help provide tools and science to help you better shape your programs. Be on the lookout for that. We're working hopefully on a project to make all of these data from this public perception survey a little bit more digestible. So you might be hearing from us through that listserv in the future. And we're interested in hearing from you and how we can best create that so that it's helpful for everybody. So with that, thank you very much. Like I said, this recording will be available on the website soon. So if you ever want to come back to it, it'll be there. And with that, I'll let you go. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much, Steve. That was great.
Thanks all.
And have a great rest of your day.